let's get started. Brain health. I am not going to claim that I know everything of the brain. It's a fascinating subject. I'm just going to point out to the things that I have experienced here, that I have data here about the past years that we have been working here. And everything you see, smell, hear, touch is recorded in your brain. It's part of your experience. It's part of who you are. And 9 out of 10 diseases start right here. So we want to make sure that we understand what's going on in the brain. Now I'm going to start with a Bible verse. It says Proverbs 4:23 says, "Keep your heart with all diligence, because out of it are the issues of life." Now when the Bible talks about heart, it's actually referring to the brain, right? To your mind. That's the area where issues, thoughts are. So this is an important thing because we're going to see at the end of the presentation how true this is. Okay? Now, talking about the brain, the first part we're going to cover is the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is the frontal cortex of your brain. And here it's one of the most important regions of your brain because it actually distinguishes you from other creatures. If you look at different creatures, you see that right here what's highlighted is the frontal lobe of these creatures. And you can see the cat, 3% of the brains of the cat, it's frontal lobe. Now the dog is 7.5. You can see that 7.5, it's actually the double of the frontal lobe of the cat. Now, the monkey is 17%, and we humans are 33 to 38% frontal lobe. Now, what makes this different from each of them? It looks like the more cognitive functions a creature has, the bigger the frontal lobe. I don't know if you're following that trend. So, for example, if you have a cat, the cat really doesn't have a lot of cognitive functions. I mean, the dog, it can relate more with you. It has some behavior, things that you could do with the dog that it attaches to you in a different way than a cat can do. Now the monkey, I went to Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago. It's a free zoo, but it's really, really good zoo. And basically, they have a section from gorillas and monkeys, big section. And one day I was walking towards that area, and I see a lot of people congregating, and they were going to do a demonstration with one of these gorillas. And the demonstration was that they had an iPad, and he was going to play games with the iPad. And I was like, this is incredible that a gorilla can play with an iPad. For me, it's like, wow, that's huge. So the game was the following. They were going to give him, there were different items that were coming up in the iPad, and he would press the one he wanted to eat. He had a preference to eat. So for example, if it was cucumbers that came in and he hit cucumber, a little piece of cucumber would come out and he would eat it, right? Well, he didn't like cucumbers. He liked cherry tomatoes. So no matter how they hid these cherry tomatoes, every time one showed up, he would pick that cherry tomato and the little cherry tomato would come and he would eat it. So I was like, wow, that's surprising, Now, what is interesting about this is us humans. What is different between humans and different animals? What do you say is different? I know, but as far as these numbers here and this bigger. Yes, it's bigger. And not only bigger, it's actually a range. You see, these ones are static, while human, we have a range. We have from 33% to 38% of our brain could be frontal lobe functions. So now, if I ask you the question, the next question is, well, which one do you want? Do you want 33 or 38%? You would say 38, right? It makes sense because the more frontal lobe, the more cognitive functions, sorry. the more cognitive functions you should have. So now, the other question is, how do we get 38%? That would be the next question. How do I get there, if there's a possibility? Well, before we go there, let me tell you the functions of the frontal lobe. I said there were cognitive behavior. Let's figure it out. There's intellect. So part of your intellect is part of the frontal lobe. Reasoning capacity. So the ability to reason, judgment, and willpower. Now, if you go to a meeting, maybe a family reunion, or maybe a business meeting, you find people that you just can't reason with them. We can't reason together. What's going on? It becomes an emotional conversation all of a sudden, or things don't go where you need to go. What's going on there? Is it because they don't have a frontal lobe? Or maybe they have 33% of frontal lobe? Actually not. Even with 33% of frontal lobe, you can reason. We're going to look into what kind of deactivates, would say. I'm going to pick a word, deactivate the frontal lobe, and people don't reason. Or what about judgment? You know, like people just lack judgment. Have you had any family member that goes over the same mistake over and over? Oh, I have this problem again. And I have this problem again. It's like, man, these people just don't know how to solve these issues. These are simple issues that should be able to be solved, and they just lack that judgment. Or there is this man, with a beautiful family, beautiful wife, beautiful children, and all of a sudden, something gets into his head, and he runs off with a younger woman. Once he's out there with that younger woman, he's like, man, what did I do? What mess is this? Financially, it's not good. For my health, it's not good. I'm not eating the same way I was eating. I don't have the social life that I used to have. What's going on? I need to go back, but it's already too late most of the times. What caused this man to do that decision? Because it was an irrational decision, the lack of judgment decision. We see it every time, right? So what causes somebody to lack this judgment? Or what about willpower? I lack the willpower to do the things that I want to do. I'm off to whatever. These are functions of the frontal lobe. Now, we were asking the question, how can we get 38% of our brain to be frontal lobe? Well, let me tell you how it develops. If you are below 30 years old, you still have opportunity to develop that frontal lobe. But if you're above 30 years old, there's no more opportunity. That's it. No more development of your frontal lobe. So now, it could be good news or bad news. I don't know which side of the spectrum you're at. Bad news, right? Well, no, you know what? You can influence. Maybe you have grandchildren or children or somebody else that you can help make that frontal lobe develop as it needs to. So 30 years. Now, the way the frontal lobe develops is very simple. It is a part of a function of the frontal lobe, which is the willpower. So if you exercise your willpower, then you're able to develop that frontal lobe. So that's kind of like a muscle, but it's not a muscle. You see, when you work out, your muscles develop. You get stronger muscles. The same with willpower. The more you exercise willpower, the more your frontal lobe develops. So how do we develop our willpower? And what is willpower? Well, in order for a child to develop his frontal lobe by exercising the willpower, it needs lines, very defined lines of what's right and what's wrong. Okay? And when children are growing, I don't know if, at least my experience with my daughters were, at one point in their age, they were saying, Daddy, is that person good or bad? Like, no, it's just a friend that you never met. Oh, okay. Is that good or bad? And no, this is not good or, it just, their minds were so square with trying to define what was good or bad in their lives. And That's how you exercise the willpower. So, for example, if I'm a parent and one day I say, this is wrong, you should not do this, but the next day I go ahead and change my mind and it's not, today you can do it, then the child does not have a way to exercise that willpower. So I always have to be very consistent so that the willpower can be able to be exercised. And it has to be very clear, very well defined. You could tell a child, parents do this, I've seen them, say, you cannot use the phone to play games. No video games for you, no playing games for you. And the child wants to play with that phone and wants to play video games. Actually, Disney made a research, and they were looking at what areas in Disneyland in Orlando the children were attracted the most. And they brought these scientists from, I don't know what university, it was one of those renowned universities. And they brought these scientists that were trying to figure out what areas in Disneyland these children were more attracted. And you know what they found out? They found out that children were more, the activity that they were most attracted in Disneyland was the time the parents were not using their phones. At that moment, they would, can I have the phone to play? I was like, wow, impressive. They were more attracted to the phones of their parents than all the things that Disneyland was doing for them to attract these children. Amazing. So now the parent says, no phone for you. And they're like, how can I get that phone? How can I get that phone? If the parent has not a very clear mark where my word says something and I mean it, here's what's going to happen. Somebody comes to visit mommy, and mommy's talking with this person, and I got an opportunity. So he goes, mommy, can I have the phone? Just hold on, I'm talking to this person. Can I have the phone now? No, I'm talking to this person. Can I have the phone now? I'm talking to this person. It just gets, mommy gets like, oh, I'm talking to this person. It makes me look bad, Says, can I talk? Here, have it. Basically, the child is doing, I know there's a button somewhere that I can press, and I'm going to find it somehow. I'm going to find it until I find it and I get it, right? So these times are not times that the child can exercise his will. So his frontal lobe will not develop. So his reasoning capacities, his judgment, and other things. Now, this number here, 30 years, is very interesting because in ancient cultures, they would not give men leadership authority until they were 30 years old. For example, Alexander the Great, my Greek friend left, but Alexander the Great, he started, his kingdom until he was 30. Even Jesus Christ started at 30 years old. So it was a time where man was really, the frontal lobe should be completely developed, 30 years old. So this is important. If we have children below that time, we do have urgency to make sure that these can happen. Now, there was a doctor, Dr. Kevin Lehman, he understood very well. And these children, there was all these shows were very popular, like The Nanny, and all these shows that there were rebellious children, and there was this person would come and fix the children over a period of time. I don't know if you remember these shows. Where these books says have a new kid by Friday, and basically what it is that you mean what you say. You have the very defined lines of demarcation of what's good and right, and you follow through with those things. You exercise the will power of that child all the time. And that's how you change behavior. It says in 5 days, so that's pretty quickly. Now, yes, so a well-defined of what's right and what's wrong, it's important to develop that frontal lobe because it exercises the willpower. And the will, the thing with the will is that the will cannot be forced. What happens if you have a vine and you go, a grapevine, and you are too hard on it? What happened to it? You bend it too hard. What was that? You break it. But what happened if you just don't do anything to it? You're too soft with it. It will just grow wherever it wants to grow. So the will has to be something that you have to take time and energy and guide it throughout the time. You know, I've seen parents that the child is running while mommy is like, come on, like. That's not a good parenting strategy, because there's no exercising of the will. You're too concerned about your own interests and not the ones of the person that depends on you. So now, but here's what typically happens with the exercise of the will. Mommy tells little Jimmy, sit in this chair here. Okay, sit right here. And Jimmy has a lot of energy. He just doesn't want to sit. I would say a plug for tomorrow's class. His liver is in great shape. So he has energy like crazy. He never falls asleep. He just want to run. So mommy says, sit in this chair. What does Jimmy do? He sits in the chair, right? He's sitting in the chair and he's looking at this adult friend of his. What does that mean? And he's like, you know, I want to run. So as soon as mommy gets distracted, Jimmy goes, he's standing on the chair. Now, he's in the chair for him, but he's trying to test out what is this adult friend of mine means by me staying in this chair, right? And then when mommy's not looking, what does? Trying to figure out if something is going to happen to him. This is a perfect time to exercise the will. Now, what would happen if he's barefooted, right? And mommy says, sit in the chair. And for some reason, there were some tacks, something in the floor that was dangerous for him. And he would step on those. Maybe Legos, not something so brutal like this. But I didn't find Legos, so I just put this. But something that would hurt him. What would happen immediately when he stand on these things? He would sit and he would cry. Now, next time mommy says sit on the chair, what will he do? He will stay seated. It would create a memory, and it would actually be an exercise of the will. He knows next time, this command means this. I should stay here. Now, that never happens. You never have this at all. What really happens is the following. Jimmy sits on the chair. Jimmy's like, and when mommy's not looking, he goes, figures out, and he goes running and doing his own thing. When mommy sees him, he goes, Jimmy, it's time. It's time, sit. And Jimmy goes and sits. And then, again, he goes, mommy looks somewhere else, and he stands and he starts playing with things, and it says, Jimmy sits, and Jimmy goes and sits. And then again, it goes on and on and on for a period of time, right? That's what happens. Until mommy gets fed up and says, Jimmy, how many times have I tell you to sit? And starts screaming, right? And that boy starts, and starts crying and sits. You know, at that moment, that was not an exercise of the will. What happens is it bypassed the frontal lobe, and it hit this area, which is called the amygdala in your limbic system. Created an emotion, and this emotion was so strong that the child got feared and sat down. It sat down not because of the idea that, hey, I need to obey, but it was a fear response. Now, is it time for a break? I think it is. Okay. Just make sure you lift your finger so I can know and I can break, okay? Let's break now. Let's take a break, and then we'll come back and continue with this. Thank you. Okay, So let's get started again. Let's catch up. And so a child that has been screamed at and not, exercised, the willpower didn't been exercised, he now has to face this emotional overload. And this is a person that when it grows is very emotional in their life. You can start a conversation with them and emotions start, going very quickly. And it's a person that is driven to these stimuli of emotions, the soap operas, the dramas, the things like that. And the reason is because these things don't engage the frontal lobe, they actually engage this area here. Now the amygdala is like an alarm system of the body. It's what alerts you, it's what protects you. So you see in these big buildings like that, you always see like an alarm level that you just pull that and that rings the alarm in the building and also calls directly the fire department. So your amygdala takes that same responsibility, and it's like, let's say, here we're in tornado zone. There's tornadoes that could pass through here, and every day you know that there's tornadoes that could go through here, and all of a sudden you hear an alarm. Whoa! What do? Immediately you react to it. You start reacting. You're like, oh, there's a tornado. There's an alarm for a tornado. So what are we going to do? Basically, your amygdala got activated. And its job is to go and protect you, take care of you. Whatever problems you have, let's figure out what we're going to do. At that moment, what happens is whatever is in your digestive system will stop. Your digestive system stops at that moment. Blood starts flowing to these parts of your body. Your arms, your legs, this part. Because it's just going to go, I got to do something. I got to run. I got to protect myself. Now, when I tell you, hey, it sounds at 10 every morning. Or at noon every day. You look at your watch and you see noon, what happens to you? You calm down. The reaction is not as, okay, it's okay. I don't have to react to this because what just happened there in that example, your frontal lobe got engaged, it reasoned things out, and then calm you down. But there's cases in people that have this affected, and the alarm goes on, and it can never stop. This would be anxiety. I have anxiety, a panic attack, and I just can't stop. I mean, this is completely alarmed, and no reasoning at this moment can help. It's just like, everything is fine, you're okay. The person is like, and you see them going to the hospital, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. And all of a sudden, they're sitting there, and the hospital is rushed with people, and they're waiting and think, I'm having a heart attack here, anybody helps? And the nurses are running up, and as soon as the turn comes, okay, it's my turn now, an emergency comes in, and people that are injured by an accident are coming in, and the person is seeing all these things, So obviously, they know they cannot get in because these people have priority. And by the time this all goes in, the person is like, forgets that, I don't have any problem anymore. So they checked them and said, no, I'm okay now. That was a panic attack. I had somebody here that came that way. They didn't tell me that that's what they were here for. They were here because they wanted to learn about organic farming. So the whole family came. The wife wanted to lose some pounds. The sister wanted to lose some pounds. So I assumed that's what it was. Nobody told me that this was a problem. One day, through the hallway, the guy is like, I'm dying, I'm having a stroke, call the doctor, where's the doctor? And you can imagine, we as people, we are very kind. We want to help. We don't know how, but we want to help. So if you can imagine everybody coming out, it's like, let's help. Anybody helping? And I was not around. I was in the back. And they call rushing, this person is dying. And so, I mean, at the moment, I did react to it. It's like, he was like, I was having a stroke. And he's almost about to die, that it looks like he was going to die. So, and everybody's like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? So, at that moment, I mean, I prayed and I said, God, what do you want me to do in this case? It's crazy. All the commotion, and all of a sudden, I get the idea to take him back to the area where I did the evaluations. Now, the evaluations weren't here in the front, they were in the back. So I was able to take him, walk with him to the back with his wife. I sit him down. I did all the evaluations, checked him, his blood pressure, everything. Everything was perfect. I said, you're not having a stroke. You're having a panic attack. His eyes open wide like this, and his wife starts cracking up and just laughing and laughing and laughing. I'm like, oh, okay, whoa, what's going on here? Everybody has been scared, and you're laughing. He says, this is the reason we came here. We came from a different part where Maria is from. We came from over there, here. We traveled all the way here just because of this problem. And I said, you didn't tell me anything. I didn't know that. Well, he just didn't want to say. And so we gave him a recipe to engage his frontal lobe. And he never had one of those incidents through the program here. And it was a long program at that time. And he was the happiest and most fun persons you could meet. It was just great guy. A musician, he would sing, he was funny, he was a great guy. But, it was just, this part here was just completely out of sync, and he needed to engage his frontal lobe. Now, I've been talking about the frontal lobe. Let's see. This is probably the most important slide of the whole presentation. Your body, your brain requires 33% of the glucose your body intakes. So 33%, a third of all the energy that you take in goes to your brain. It's headquarters, so it's very important to have all the energy. Let's put it in perspective. I have a banana, and I cut it in 3 pieces. A third of that banana, the energy that comes from that banana, is going to feed the brain. Wow, right? Now, this is the most important sentence of the whole presentation. The brain can only store 2-minute reserve. So, it doesn't have a lot of storage for energy. What does that mean? See, I want to wake you up. You're taking all these things and you're starting to slow down, and I know it. It happens at this class. 2-minute reserve, and you need 33% of all the energy your body takes goes to the brain. Basically, what it means is that your body needs a constant supply of energy. You see? When you do fasting, you got to start getting sluggish. Why? Because your brain at that moment is saying, I need energy. I need energy. If I don't have energy, the brain does not work. So what do you think happens to reasoning when there is no energy? What happens to judgment when there is no supply of energy? What happens to willpower when there's a lack of energy to the brain? Yes. What happens to intellect when you have a lack of energy to the brain? You figure it out, right? Yeah. Also, the brain needs 20% of all the oxygen consumption. So for every 5 breaths you take, 1 is to feed the brain. So in these rooms, sometimes that there's no airways or air, 20%, yes. Now, think about it. You go to churches and people start, you see people falling up in church, falling asleep in churches. Thank you. Why it happened? Because is it boring? No, there's no air. There's no oxygen. All these people are breathing at the same time. There's no oxygen flow. So obviously, people are going to fall asleep. The brain says, I don't want to do all this work. I want to fall asleep. Now, it's also 73% water. What happens if you don't drink water, enough water? It becomes like a racing. You know, you get headaches. Things happen when you don't drink enough water. So this is important. Yes?
Does 73% of water go to the brain?
No, it's made of 73% water. Your brain is made of 73% water. 20% of the population suffers from mental diseases. 20%, that's diagnosed, right? They are taking pills, they're taking some medications for this. 11% of teenagers suffer from just depression. This is a national crisis, if you ask me. If you have, you know, the moose in Idaho or Washington, you know, that 11% of them are having an issue, which I think in Maine, that's a problem with those animals. If they have a problem, a disease, you know, the news come out and say, hey, there's a problem, we're losing our moose, and this and that and the other. But 11% of our teenagers are suffering, not all mental diseases, just depression, and nobody's doing anything about it. What's going on? Medication is not the answer because, you know, as we speak, we're having all these suicide attacks, we're having all these things with our teenagers, and nothing is, I mean, where are we heading as a society at this moment? It's very, very discouraging what's going on in our society because you'll see the future and it's very, very glim. We have different dimensions of health. And one of the most important factors is mental health. 9 out of every 10 diseases start right here. 9 out of 10 diseases. It's incredible. Because here you have your perception of things. You know, you have a perception of, for example, there's people that get panic for things that should not be panicked. You should not be panicked about those things, but you get panic about it. All that stuff, all that fear, everything starts right here. And there's many other things, okay? Just wanted to share that. Now, how do you know if you have a mental condition? I'm just going to read some of these things. You check the ones that apply to you. If you experience 5 out of these 9 symptoms for the last 2 weeks, deep sadness and emptiness, apathy or loss of interest, agitation or slowdown, sleep disturbances, weight or appetite changes, lack of concentration, feeling of worthlessness, fatigue, morbid thoughts. If you have 5 of these, you have what is called chronic depression. 3 of these, it's what you call mild depression. Okay? So, we got to think about these things. What's going on in our lives? Here are in Spanish, but I'm going to pass these ones. Now, there's hit categories for depression, and the biggest one is the frontal lobe. Frontal lobe is the big one. When there's lack of blood flow to the frontal lobe, most likely you're going to have depression. Okay, most likely. Now, these all these affect you, but it's a problem. Now, I believe that the biggest issue with how the brain works is how the body manages sugar, what is called sugar management. Now, I'm not saying if you eat sweets or not sweets. I'm just saying what happens when you eat something that has sugar. How does your body react to it? So the way the body reacts on this is going to dictate how your brain functions. This is very important. Now, your levels of sugar and fasting glucose in your body should be this light didn't come out, so I want it. It should be from 70 milligrams per deciliter to 100. It didn't come out. I changed it to black and it didn't come out. Anyways, just 70 to 100 should be your levels of insulin, or I mean your glucose levels in your blood. That's how it should be when fasting. This is what's healthy. When it's too high, what happens? When the sugar is too high, what happens? Yes, there's insulin that comes out as response, and also you have problems with your cardiovascular systems, your kidneys, and many other issues start, but these are the key ones that happen. Your kidneys, your nerve systems, these things start affecting you as you, if you have the sugar levels too high. So somebody that has had diabetes for a while, it behooves them to make sure that they change this habit. Something has to change. You cannot just say, I'm going to eventually change it. Okay? Now, if it's too low, you don't have enough glucose or sugar to feed the functions of the body for energy of the cells. But what about your brain? Do you think down here, below 70, you have reasoning capacity? Hardly any. Do you have judgment capacity? Hardly any. Look, let's look. You go and get refined sugar. Refined sugar, it's just glucose. I mean, it's just a lot of it. And we saw that sodas and these things have a lot of it. So you go to a dentist office or you go to a bank, and what do they have in the counter? They have lollipops. Why would they have those lollipops there? What is the idea of having those lollipops there? What do they want you to do? Get cavities. Well, conspiracy theory here. What happens is that, maybe a parent comes with these children, and I suppose that they come with two boys, right, which are full of energy running around, and they just can't stop. And now they pick up a turn, right? Their turn is 38, and they're in 20, for example. They have to sit there, and they want to run around, and mommy sits them together, and they're playing, and all of a sudden they're just running around and disturbing everyone. Like nobody has children here before, If you have children, that's how they are. Everybody has them. You don't have to be concerned about what other people are thinking. That's how it is, right? But no, what parents do, they take some of those lollipops and give them to the children, and the children are just happy with their lollipops, and you see they're swinging their feet, and they're just happy, and they're quiet, they're sitting. That's what the parent wanted, right? It's all working. But then, after that candy goes away, and there's no more candy, and they're just stop, and they haven't called the parent, and they're still at 35, these children start, no, that's mine, give it to me, and they start fighting between each other. And just, mom tries to say, okay, children, let's just 3 more numbers, just sit still, and we'll go to the store and buy you a toy. She's trying to do what with them? She's trying to reason with them. She's trying to reason with them. Can they reason? No, they cannot reason. Here's a spike of insulin. Sorry it doesn't look as clear as I wanted to, but I'll give you a copy of this so you have it, and it will be better. So she's trying to reason. Refined sugar comes up, and it gives you a insulin spike, goes down, and typically goes really low. And here, the mother is trying to reason with these children, but they're just what? They're fighting with each other. They cannot reason. I say that if you want disobedient children, just give them candy. Okay, grandmothers? If there's any grandmother here or grandparents, you want your children to be disobedient, give them candy. Why do I say grandmother? Because the children take the grandkids to their grandparents, and when they come back, they're like, ah, what's going on? What happened? They were just feeding them candy. Now, you want a disobedient child, just give him candy. Now, the next thing is starches. Starches are good for you. We eat starches here. But the thing with starches is that starches are even worse than refined sugar. And here's why. You see, it gives you a higher insulin spike, and it actually goes faster down. Why is that? Is that supposed to be? When I'm talking starches, I'm talking rice, corn, wheat, oats, not legumes in this case. I'm talking starches like the ones that come from cereal grains, most likely. What happened with these? Well, there was a time, just to give you some idea, starches, it's a cluster of sugars, okay? They're really high density cluster of sugars. So let's say in refined sugar you have 2 molecules of sugar. Just to give you an example, I'm not saying that's how it is, but just to give you an idea, 2 molecules of sugar. In starches you have way more. You have probably 50 combined in cluster. So it's even more than that. Now, what happens is that in order for you to digest these starches, these sugars, you needed to cook them for a long time. You needed to cook them for a long time. And what happens in the cooking process, when it heated up, it would actually separate denaturize these starches so that you can assimilate it. But for example, for oats, in order to break down these structures so you can digest all the sugars in oats, you needed to cook them for 2 hours. Who cooks oats for 2 hours? Rice, 2.5 hours. No one. That's oatmeal. What about corn? 2 more hours. Nobody does that. So basically people would eat these uncooked starches, and they would get probably 2% of the energy in that starch. The rest, they would poop out. Okay? So that's what used to happen. So then there was a big world depression in the 60s, around the 60s. And there were 2 countries that are very populated, India and Mexico. And most of their diet, and all the other countries, most of their diet are based in starches like this. So it does not make sense. Scientists said, well, it doesn't make sense that they have all this energy and they're starving. Doesn't make any sense. I mean, they're not cooking the starches the amount of time they need to cook them, so it just doesn't make sense that that they're not getting the energy. You know what I mean, right? Yes. So what to do? So they decided to modify these starches. And then I'm not talking genetically modified, but there was some hybridization on these starches. And what they did, they made them so that you can basically, when you eat these starches, you have what is called amylase in your mouth. It's an enzyme to digest starches. So you can start the digestions right here in the, you can start the digestions right here in your mouth. So now you could get all this energy that is in a starch right when you chew them. You're not wasting that energy. That's a great idea because poor countries that had based their diet on these starches, now they didn't need it as much to get all the energy they need. You follow me, right? But the only problem is that if your diet is full of this, what happens is that you're going to have a really high insulin spike and then a low. Then caffeine. Caffeine is another one. When you drink caffeinated drinks, what happens is even though you don't put sugar in your tea, I drink this tea that has caffeine but I don't put any sugar, or I drink coffee and I don't put any sugar. Well, it really does not matter, because what happens with coffee is that it stimulates the body to have stress. It creates a stress response. It's like all of a sudden there's a snake that comes into this room. What do you do when there's a snake? If you see a snake coming in, a huge snake, what is your reaction? First thing, the amygdala starts. Woo! What am I going to do? I got to react. You know what the first thing happens? Anything that is in your digestive system is going to stop. You're in alert mode, right? Remember, you're in alert mode. You got to do something. Well, the same happens with caffeine. And the thing is that when you drink caffeine, you drink it and what do? You sit. You eat something and you drink caffeine and you sit. What's going to happen to your digestion when you do that? Stops. Your digestion stops. It's craziness to drink a caffeinated drink after your meal or with your meal, because it'll stop your digestion. You create a stress response in the body and then you sit. So eventually your body's saying, okay, a snake is coming. What am I going to do? But I don't do anything. A snake is coming. What am I going to do? I don't do anything. A snake is coming. What am I going to do? I don't do anything. At one point, you get extremely tired. But here's what happens when you get that reaction. You release stress hormones, and these stress hormones are going to take all the sugar stored in your liver and your muscles and put them in your bloodstream, because we got to run. So that's why you get an insulin spike also with caffeine and a low. That's why you crash after drinking caffeinated drinks. You see? Now, think about this. You need 33% of the energy that you bring into your body goes to your brain. And you're having this pattern and starting here. And now you have a relationship with your husband or wife. And you're just not agreeing on things. There's disagreement patterns. Or you have a meeting and you're a group of people that have a meeting, and now you're trying to solve a problem, but you try to reason things out. And the patterns are down here. What do you think is going to happen? See, relationships turn sour because your brain is not working, because it's spending a lot of time down here. There's this doctor, I forgot his name. I could look it up because I have the book. And he says that before you get a divorce, do a glucose tolerance test. Because it could be that you're not reasoning things out because you're down here. You're not seeing things right because you're spending down here. See, I would bet that that husband that has a beautiful wife, beautiful children, and goes out with a younger woman and leaves his family behind, and then he's like, oh, what did I do? What did I do this error for, this mistake? He's probably spending a lot of time here. He's lacking judgment. Children now in teenagers that have lack of judgment in the things they do, not only they have an undeveloped frontal lobe, remember it takes 30 years to develop it, but they're also spending a lot of time here. They're depressed. Why? Because their brain is not getting what it needs and is spending a lot of time here. Now, there's salads. And this is a curiosity that I didn't know until I got here. Salads have a very even pattern. You see, because of the high fiber, the sugar release is very even. So let's say I have diabetes. Eating salads is great because it shouldn't raise my sugars too much. Hardly any. I'm very steady. So I eat a salad and I can stay filled up longer. I have the energy longer for my brain to work more efficient. But I eat a cereal like we did on Saturday, and as soon as, midday, I was like, when are we going to get there? I'm starving. What's going on? Because of how the grains, the starches. So now, I just told you part of the story. This is not all the story. Their body has mechanisms to manage sugar. It has your thyroid, right? The thyroid is there, and basically, look what it does. It releases thyroxine, and the thyroxine brings the sugar up. It does not allow the sugar to stay down, right? So if you have a low sugar, it goes, start in action. But you start doing this every day, every single day, and you know what happens? This starts getting very slow. Your thyroid starts getting very slow. It's not working as efficient as it used to. And then you add the stress on top of it, you name it. Pancreas. The pancreas releases insulin. Now, insulin, what it does, is it bring the sugar up or down? It brings it down. That's what it does. It delivers glucose into the cell. It brings the glucose, the energy down into your cells. Now, it also produces glucagon. Now, glucagon basically converts fat into glucose. So if there's a storage of fat, it will burn it so you could have glucose. So it will bring your sugar up. The same with the pituitary gland. Releases HGH. It regulates metabolism, helps you with thyroid and all that stuff. It brings the sugar up. You have your adrenal glands. And these adrenal glands help you with many things. But one of the things is stress response. I have a stress response. I'm in stress. These glands will take over. They produce adrenaline or peripherin or norepinephrine and cortisol. It deals with these things. Now, it helps convert fat into glucose. So it also brings the sugar up in your body. Now, I have a pattern where I start waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning every single day. And that's okay if that's what you want to do. But let's say you want to sleep, you're in bed and you want to sleep longer, and you turn around and you say, I can't sleep a little bit longer. And you just can't. You turn around and say, why am I not sleeping? And you're thinking about all the things you have to do the next day, or all the things you didn't do the last day. What's going on there? Yeah, it's stress, yes. But basically what happens is that these adrenal glands are exhausted. When the brain is not getting any sugar, you release something called cortisol. And cortisol, what it does, it converts the storage you have in your liver into your bloodstream, so you could get some sugar. But the brain says, hey, Harvey, where are you? I'm dying here. I don't have any sugar. Harvey. And it's just, I don't have any sugar. So cortisol should be released so that you get some sugar and level it out. But it's so tired because you have stress. You have a pattern of ups and downs, eating these things that get you up and down. And it's just like, I'm too tired to do anything. So now the brain says, wake up, Harry. Wake up. And it starts putting things in your brain just so you can't go back to bed. And you wake up every day at 3 or 4 in the morning. Happens, anybody can relate. Now, it's interesting because, I'm going to speed up through this. God created 6 hormones to bring your sugar levels up, to balance this out. And 1 to bring it down. Why the difference? Why he put more in one side than the other? Does anybody knows? There's a reason he put 6 on one side to bring your sugar up and 1 to bring it down. He designed you for a reason that way. Well, you know what? What happens if your sugar stays low all the time? What gets affected the most? The brain. So what happened to your reasoning capacity? What happened to your intellect? What happened to your judgment, willpower? You become an animal. The only thing that makes you different than an animal is what? Your frontal lobe capacity. The rest is just pretty animal behavior. So now you see the animal behavior where the problem is. It's typical breakfast for Americans. You know, what do we have here? Bread, right? Which is starches. Then on top of it, what do you have? Sugar. And then you have caffeine. And then you have sugar. No wonder. You know, what is it going to do? Up, down. What about the cereal here? The same thing. You see it. Now this is even worse. You have your fats and your carbohydrates. It actually creates an even higher spike of insulin. They tested this where they gave these people potatoes. Potatoes have a high glycemic index, they say, right? By the way, I had potatoes in this picture here, and I was talking about the russet potato, the McDonald potato, the potato that is the Idaho potato, the big one, long one. That one, it's all genetically modified, thanks to McDonald's. So I would say stop eating that big potato, eat the red or the golden potatoes, right? McDonald's has completely influenced the source of these big potatoes. They're all GMO. So even though there's some that said organic, I don't know about that. The red or the golden potato. So now, you eat potatoes, and in this research they said, you eat potato, they measure your sugar spike with this potato. Then they gave somebody salmon with potato, which it's just fat and protein. And what happens to their glycemic index was really high, almost double than just basic potato. Where is the sugar in these things? Well, the reaction of the fat, it blocks the insulin input into the cells, and it creates a higher insulin response. Now, look, you go for lunch, and what do you have? Your pasta, which is your starches, your rice, which is more starches, and sandwich, which is more starches. So obviously, you can see that our lives are going from up, down, up, down. No wonder we cannot reason together. We cannot get along each other. You see this pattern, you say, whoa, I'm seeing my spouse here. That's why we have disagreements. We can't focus here to solve a problem. You know, the caffeine, the starches, the refined sugars, the sodas, there's a big deal. Your brain doesn't work on these things. It goes up and down until it just doesn't work very well. So these are things to consider. This is just one of the things. We're going to have another class on Friday, and we're going to talk about healing the brain. We're going to review this, and we're going to go to some other deeper subjects on how the brain works. Now, I just want to say that you have your brain attaches to most of the organs of the body through this vagus nerve. You can see this vagus nerve here, and this vagus nerve attaches to all these areas. Look at all the organs that it attaches to. So it controls these, and basically what it does is sends a signal to these organs and is looking for, hey, are you okay? Send me an information. Send me the information back and forth. Now, if your brain starts deteriorating, the connection here through this brain, through this nerve, is going to be very sporadic. Sometimes you see people with problems, health problems in different organs. Things are not working as they should, and basically it starts right here in the top. So sometimes we have to stimulate this, which I have seen. I have different crazy stories about this that had happened here, and I just like, wow. So I'll tell you that in the answer and a question and answer if you want to. Now, the Bible again, finishing with the Bible says, Isaiah 1:18, come now, this is what God says, come now and let us reason together, says the Lord. The way God talks to you is with reasoning capacity. If your reasoning capacity is not working, what do you expect? God cannot function, not connect with you. Sometimes you have people that you want them to have more spirituality. They can't. They don't reason. Have no capacity for reasoning. So it's a big problem. Or if you go to some places, people have a religion that is based on emotions, not reasoning. They cannot reason things out. Why am I doing the things that I'm doing? Why am I taking this course? No, I'm just doing it because it just emotion, because there's no reason about it. But you look at their lifestyle and you see that the lifestyle is not conducive for reasoning. It's conducive for emotions. So these things point into all areas of our lives, and we have to pay attention to them. Okay, does anybody has any questions? And if you have questions, since we're recording, I'll have to repeat the question, so bear with me. Anybody has questions?
Ahora de la depresión, por ejemplo, que dices que hay falta de qué, de concentración.
Mm-hmm.
Esas cosas las vienen en el paquete también.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all the ones, I had some hit points for depression. Those I'm going to include in the package that you're going to take. Okay. Anything else? Okay, well, see you for the next part of the class, which is going to be brain part 2, brain health part 2. And we'll address some of the things, maybe questions and things that actually don't allow us to heal our brain and heal completely our body. Thank you for your attention, and it was a good time.